Alright, to start this project, you're going to start with a circular piece of leather that should be pre-cut out, and you're going to need this stitching groover. Now it has a little twisty knob right below the cutting head that you can twist that'll allow you to adjust the wing on the side that acts as a guide. So you can see I'm just pulling it around the side of this piece of leather. That wing acts as a guide. Now that I've done that first part, I'm going to twist it to the left, and I can just change the size. Once I see where I want it, I'll twist it back into place, and then here we go. We'll just cut that other line. Now that stitching groove is good for if you're doing stitching, but it's also really handy to create a perfect outline on the piece of leather that you're using, which is the case here. So we created that second outline as a border. And now what we're going to do is we're going to bevel the edge of the leather. So I'm going to use this beveling tool. It's got two forks, one on either side, and there's a blade in the middle. So you just put the fork on the top half and the side of the leather, just like you see here. And then once I have that done, I'll flip it over and I'm going to do it on the bottom. That's just going to get rid of any sharp edges that come from cutting the leather at a 90-degree angle. So now we've got a 45-degree bevel just on those edges, which makes it feel a little bit nicer. So now what I'm going to do is, now that we've got that done, is I'm going to put a stamp here in the middle that says handmade by. Now there's different ways that you can do this. If you want to put your initials in the middle, you can do that. I really like this handmade by stamp because it just kind of makes it a little bit more personalized. So I'm going to make sure that I get it centered on the piece of leather, just right here. And then once I have it centered, I'm going to apply a little bit of pressure with my hand, and I'm going to give it a couple taps with the hammer. And then after I've got it set, I'm going to hit it a little harder, and I'm going to rock it from side to side to side. I know you can't really see the rocking right here, but that rocking helps to get different angles on it. Now this leather, I didn't get quite enough moisture on it, and so it didn't set in very well. It's way better to only have to do this once. If I'm trying to replace the stamp, it can be really hard. So here is after I've made it a little bit wetter, and then I was able to restamp. So I'm using a tri-weave Basketweave stamp, and this one is one where you stamp it one time and then you replace that stamp in another spot. And so I'm just going to repeat this all over the entire coaster. So I stamp down and then I rock from left to right, side to side. And once I've got that stamp in place, now I can replace the top at the bottom. There's just a little groove there for it to fit in. And once I have it set nicely in there, I go from one side, from the other, and I just kind of move the whole thing around at an angle so that I get a nice stamp on either side. So that is the basics of how to stamp. I'm going to go ahead and fast forward this video so you don't have to listen to my voice this whole time. One thing that you want to pay attention to is making sure that you keep everything square as you're stamping. I didn't do it here because this stamp works out a little bit better than some, but it's not a bad idea to score a light line in the leather so that you know where a straight line is to start with, and then you don't run into that trouble in the end. Now one thing that you're going to notice is that I never let my stamps go over the edge of that line. I might have gone close to it, but I never let the stamps go up to the edge, and the reason for that is that we're going to do some background tool work here. Now I'm using a Sunburst background tool. I just put the heels or the points of that tool right on the edge of the handcrafted by line that's there and just work my way around. So what that does is it hides the edge of the tooling, so even if there's a blank space between where you put your stamp and the edge, that's okay because it's going to get filled by that Sunburst tool. So again, I can't stress enough how important it is not to go all the way to the line. You're better to stop short of the line when you're stamping than to go over the line. So now that I have all of those Sunburst stamps done, it gives kind of a finished look to the edge, to the border. Now what I'm working on is I'm using these letter stamps to stamp my initials into this handcrafted by. Now you can do your initials. I have a little symbol that I made up that my wife and I have the same initials. Mine's JMB, she's MJB. And so we just have this little symbol that we made up out of those letters. I always put that when I use the handcrafted by. You can come up with a similar symbol for yourself, or if you would rather, you can just do your initials. We've got lots of different types of letters. So feel free to try something on a piece of scrap leather that is something that you're going to like. And there we go. The tooling is complete, and that's what your tooling on your coaster is going to look like. Now it's time to mark the holes that we're going to use for the lacing around the outside edge. I'm just using that Sunburst stamp just kind of as a guide for my holes. So what I'm doing is I'm just putting the heel on the one that I've already pushed down, and then I make a mark on the other, and then we just go all the way around, and I just use that as a spacer. So once I've got that done, now I'm going to get out the hole punch kit, and I'm going to punch some holes. Now we also have a rotary hole punch that you can use. You can do it this way or using the rotary hole punch. It's up to you, and it's based on what's available. So I'm going to punch a hole right on the edge of that line on all the spots that I made marks, and when it's done, it's going to look like this. So now I'm going to take some leather lace. I'm just going to cut the end a little bit so that it's tapered both ways, both sideways and top to bottom. I'm going to just put another little point on that. We have these special lacing needles that need that taper for that to fit in there, and it's got a couple little tangs that sit inside the leather, and so it doesn't pull out when you're stitching. So it should look like this when you've got it all done. Now it's time to start our stitch. So this stitch is a little complicated when you first start, but if you pay attention, I'll get you going, and it's not hard at all. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to come through the back, and you're going to curl the tail right around the back edge. Basically what we're going to do with this first part is we are just trying to make an X. Okay, so make sure you come through the back with the needle towards you, and then we make a crisscross right over the top, just like that. Okay, now we are going to start the pattern that we're going to use for the rest of this stitch. So I'm going to take the needle, and I'm just going to thread it under the first bite. A bite is where the lace comes across the leather. And so from here on out, when I talk about a bite, that's what I'm talking about, that piece of leather that comes across. So I'm going to tuck it underneath that bite, and then I'm going to come back through the hole towards me. When you go through a hole, you always come from the back towards the front. Okay? Make sure that you don't have any twists in your leather, because that makes it look really trashy. So here I am. That's the first part of the stitch completed. Now what I need to do is I need to find a bite to go underneath. Now the bite that we're looking for is the one furthest to the right, the one that we just created. So I go under that bite, and then I'm going to count back 3 holes from the hole that I came through last. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to come through that hole from the back to the front, just like that. And that's it. That's the stitch. So I'll talk you through this again, but that essentially is what you need to do. Okay. So one thing that I like to do is I'm getting my string ready. I like to grab my fingers here at the start and then run them along the whole length of the lace so that I know that I don't have any twists or curls. So here I go. I'm going to go underneath the bite. Now if you pull that bite really hard, it can be hard to get it through, but don't fall into the temptation of not doing it tight, because even though it's hard to get through, if it's not tight, the whole braid doesn't look very good. Okay, so I go under the bite, through the hole, and then I'm going to pull out all my slack, make sure I've got no twists, and tug it through, just like that. Now you're going to start to see that braid emerge, and it looks pretty cool. So here we go. Straighten string. I'm going to go underneath my bite, just like that. I'm going to count back 3 from that last hole. 1, 2, 3. Come through my hole. Here we go. Pull all that through. Now if you need to see something again, feel free to rewind and watch that part over. But I'm going to speed this up just so that we can get done with it a little bit quicker. Okay, that's it. That is your leather coaster. Now, I could have stained this. That's something that you may want to do. The gel antique that we have does a really good job of bringing out the tooling and makes it look way nicer. But I really like the color on this leather, and I think that in the end with that edge braid, it turns out looking really nice.